Well, good afternoon. Today, the subcommittee convenes to receive testimony on the fiscal year 2017 Air Force budget request regarding bomber, tanker, and airlift acquisition programs. The distinguished panel of Air Force leaders testifying before us are Lieutenant General Mike Holmes, Air Force Deputy Chief of Staff for Strategic Plans and Requirements, and Lieutenant General Arnold W. Bunch, Jr., United States Air Force Military Deputy, Office of the Assistant Secretary of the Air Force for Acquisition. Gentlemen, we thank you both for your service to our country and for taking the time to be with us today. The fiscal year 2017 budget request for Air Force projection forces is a good step forward to support our national defense. I'm pleased to see continued investment in recapitalizing the aging bomber and air refueling fleets with the critically needed long-range strike bomber, recently designated the B-21, and the KC-46A tanker. The budget also takes some steps to modernize the legacy C-130H tactical airlift fleet. That said, I continue to be concerned about the ability of our military to properly provide for our nation's defense at the proposed fiscal year 2017 budget levels. As I and many of the members of this subcommittee indicated in a letter to the chairman of the Budget Committee, this year's budget request reduced investment in critical force structure and modernization programs by approximately $18 billion. Specifically, I'm concerned about the implications of delaying the incremental replacement of the C-130H fleet and the proposed reduction of 27 C-130s. The Air Force has previously assessed that there is moderate risk with the reduced C-130 force structure, and another reduction further places our national security at even greater risk. It seems to me that the budget request will result in a tactical airlift fleet that is smaller and older, a dangerous combination. The Air Force budget rollout indicated the Air Force is one of the smallest, busiest, and oldest and least ready fleets in our history. It's my firm conviction, in light of the higher-end threats posed by China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, that the Air Force have the resources it needs to fully support and, if possible, accelerate critical recapitalization programs, to include purchasing additional aircraft with each dollar saved, if the warfighting requirements demand it. With regards to bombers, last week the Air Force designated the long-range strike bomber as the B-21 bomber. I fully support this critical program and am pleased to see that we are once again moving forward on this new platform, which will be needed for projecting power over long distances and into denied environments. With regard to tankers, I'm pleased to see that the KC-46A program appears to be on track after overcoming some initial setbacks and is continuing to execute a highly compressed test and certification schedule that has little room for error. I look forward to hearing your thoughts on this program and whether or not the first 18 aircraft will be delivered in time to meet the August 2017 contract deadline. Lastly, I'm concerned that this budget fails to provide the resources needed to procure the avionics upgrades needed to ensure that the entire fleet of tankers, airlifters, and bombers are able to cooperate safely in compliance with the FAA-mandated next-generation air traffic management standards by January 1, 2020. The civilian aviation sector is rapidly moving toward compliance, and I'm concerned that our military aircraft could be shut out of the airspace they need for transit and training. In sum, while I'm pleased that the Air Force F-2017 budget request makes up some lost ground over last year, I'm concerned that the proposed budget forces the Air Force and its sister services to make false choices between capability, capacity, and safety, when the undeniable reality is that our military needs all of the above. I firmly believe that what this subcommittee and the rest of Congress does about national defense and military readiness will be a defining issue. I firmly believe that we need a strong Air Force equipped with the most capable aircraft that enable our men and women to carry out their missions effectively and safely. To do this, we need leadership in national security. We need an unambiguous declaration that our national security is our preeminent responsibility. Once again, I want to thank our witnesses for participating in our hearing this afternoon, and I look forward to discussing these important topics. And with that, I turn to my good friend and colleague, the ranking member of the subcommittee, Joe Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for holding this hearing on the 2017 Air Force Budget Request for Projection Forces Program under the jurisdiction of our subcommittee. And thank you as well to our distinguished witnesses that are here today. The tankers, bombers, and airlift programs that fall under the projection forces side of our panel's oversight serve as the backbone of our nation's ability to conduct operations and preserve our nation's interests around the world. As we know all too well, however, they all share the common enemy of age. The tankers and bombers in service today are largely legacy aircraft that in most cases are much older than the airmen and women who fly them. As we have heard repeatedly in our hearings over the last year, the need to modernize and recapitalize these aircraft and their capabilities is increasingly critical. Rapidly improving A2AD capabilities, long-range weapons, and sensing technologies make upgrading and replacing our legacy fleets that much more important. In order to meet these challenges, we must make the right investments today to ensure that we stay ahead of these trends. In my view, the 2017 budget we are considering here today makes important investments toward this goal and on the whole moves us in the right direction. Most notably, the budget continues to reflect a high strategic priority placed on two critical recapitalization programs, the KC-46A Pegasus tanker and the newly designated B-21 long-range strike bomber. Both programs have recently seen important milestones in their progress. For example, a KC-46A successfully conducted an in-flight refueling of an FA-18 Hornet last month, making the aircraft's first use of the tanker's hose and drogue system. And the B-21 bomber recently saw the restart of the program following the conclusion of a protest of the contract award. Together, these developments show continued progress towards rebuilding the essential backbone of our force projection capabilities, and I look forward to an update on the status of these two efforts. An ongoing area of concern for me is the modernization of our C-130H fleet. The Flying Yankees of the 103rd Airlift Wing in Connecticut have largely completed their transition to their new C-130H flying mission. This mission, which ends several years of uncertainty about losing their A-10 mission in BRAC 2005, provides a sustainable and relevant role for our state and an important mobility capability for our nation. Until last year, Congress and the Air Force had struggled to move forward on a clear plan to modernize our C-130Hs. Working with Air Force officials that are here, General Holmes in particular, who's testifying today, we included language in the 2016 NDAA to allow the service to move forward with a two-part modernization program to meet near-term FAA and international airspace mandates that go into effect in 2020, and then focus on the longer-term upgrades to ensure the viability of the fleet well into the future. I'm pleased that the budget accelerates both modernization efforts, known as AMP-1 and AMP-2, for the C-130H fleet. It is my understanding that through this budget, the Air Force intends to have most, if not all, of the fleet airspace compliant by the 2020 deadline. Further, the budget outlines a plan to install 42 Increment 2 upgrades by 2021 and to the rest of the fleet by 2028. I look forward to hearing from the witnesses about ways in which the Air Force, with the support of Congress, can continue to accelerate Increment 2 to meet the enduring need for these workhorses of our nation's airlift. Finally, over the last year, Congress has made meaningful and bipartisan progress in limiting the impact of sequestration in the Budget Control Act. While partially limiting the across-the-board cuts in 2016 and 17 was important, the fact remains that our Air Force, like the military at large, remains handcuffed by sequestration in 2018 and beyond. Ever since passage of the Bipartisan Budget Act last fall, several world events have further demonstrated just how important it is for all of us in this committee and our colleagues to work on both sides of the aisle in Congress to come together to make the compromises needed to protect our security and support the needs of our nation. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and our colleagues in the subcommittee, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. And as we indicated at the beginning, we're delighted to have both of you here, and we're looking forward to your testimony. General Bunch, it's my understanding that you're going to go first, so we're looking forward to your remarks. And just so both of you know, we're going to put your written statement in the record in its entirety, so feel free to reference it in any way that you may feel appropriate to do.
Thank you, Chairman Forbes, Ranking Member Courtney, and other distinguished members for this opportunity to address the subcommittee. I greatly appreciate the work you do and the support you provide the warfighter in the United States Air Force. General Holmes and I did prepare a joint statement, and you've submitted it. I will not go through that here. I will make a few opening remarks, and then I'll turn it over to General Holmes. We are here to discuss the FY17 budget we submitted and some of the tough choices we made as we finalized the budget. While the members of our Air Force are razor sharp, dependable, and ready as ever, we cannot say the same for many of our mainstay weapon systems. The United States Air Force has essentially been in a wartime posture since 1991. This rate of deployment and constant readiness spanning a quarter century has taken its toll. You have heard the phrases used to describe our aircraft so many times that they almost become cliches. 21 aircraft fleets that would qualify for antique license plates in the state of Virginia, many pilots flying aircraft older than they are, and in some cases, third-generation pilots flying the same aircraft as their grandfather flew. In order to maintain an edge against our adversaries, as well as to reverse the trend of the increasing budget drain of operations and sustainment costs for these aging platforms, the Air Force must modernize. The Air Force has several competing choices as we continue to modernize and recapitalize our aging fleets while ensuring an appropriate level of readiness to support today's conflicts. It is imperative we get this balance right to ensure we not only win today's fight, but also stand ready to address tomorrow's threats. Our bomber, tanker, and mobility fleets are the linchpins of the Air Force's ability to provide global reach and global power in support of the national military strategy and the combatant commanders. Two of our top priority recapitalization efforts, B-21 and KC-46A, provide vital future modernized capabilities. We must keep these programs as well as other modernization efforts on track to deliver these capabilities, and we must execute all of these efforts in the most cost-effective manner possible given the budget constraints we live within. Again, I thank you for this opportunity to testify before the subcommittee, and I look forward to answering your questions. I'll stop at this point and allow General Holmes to provide his comments.
General Holmes, we welcome your remarks.
Thank you, Chairman Forbes, Ranking Member Courtney, ladies and gentlemen of the committee. Thank you for your continued support of the United States Air Force, our airmen, and their families. My good friend General Bunch and I grew up about 45 minutes apart, and the people of East Tennessee are either very proud or very surprised to see us here in front of you today. So thanks for giving us the opportunity.
I'm sure they're very proud.
So thanks for your continued support. To begin the discussion of our 2017 President's budget, it's important to frame the environment in which our decisions were made. Today's demand for Air Force capabilities continues to grow as airmen provide America with unmatched global vigilance, global reach, and global power. Airmen are engaged defending U.S. interests around the globe. Every day, approximately 200,000 airmen directly support combatant commander requirements in response to growing challenges created by an increasingly aggressive Russia, an increasingly capable China, an unpredictable North Korea, and the malign influence of Iran, all in addition to the ever-present counterterrorism mission in the Middle East and around the world. While our forces have been heavily engaged in deterring or addressing these operational challenges, our adversaries have taken the opportunity to invest in and advance their own capabilities. For the first time in decades, our adversaries are closing in on our capability advantages. Our efforts to address these increasing challenges have been stymied by reduced and unpredictable budgets. The limited resources available since the Budget Control Act of 2011 have hampered our ability to balance readiness, capability, and capacity. The 2017 President's budget trades modernization in the Air Force, particularly F-35 production rate and fourth-generation fighter modifications, but also some C-130J procurement, to sustain the capacity necessary to meet the combatant commander's urgent needs for air, space, and cyber forces, and begin recovering readiness levels after 25 years of continuous combat. And while we're very grateful for the additional resources the Bipartisan Budget Act provides compared to Budget Control Act caps, we continue to face difficult choices between capacity, readiness, and modernization. This President's budget works to make every BBA dollar count by aligning our force structure with defense strategic guidance and making down payments on the Air Force's 30-year strategy, ensuring a credible nuclear deterrent and beginning the recapitalization of our aging nuclear force structure, advancing space and cyber capabilities, maintaining the conventional force capacity required to support current operations, increasing our end strength to begin addressing key personnel shortfalls, and investing in the research and development required to regain our capability advantage in the future. We continue to fund our top 3 procurement programs, the B-21, the KC-46 tanker, and the F-35 fifth-generation fighter, although, as I said, we were unable to procure F-35s at previously planned rates. Together, our nuclear and conventional bombers, in concert with our tanker and mobility aircraft, ensure the global reach and global power required to provide effective deterrence. But both our bomber and mobility fleets are aging, as General Bunch said, and in fact, the average age of the B-52 strategic bomber and the KC-135 tanker make them both about as old as I am, and my staff pointed out that I qualified for AARP membership several years ago. To that end, this budget funds nearly $20 billion across the FYDP for procurement and $4.2 billion across the FYDP in research, development, and technology for our mobility force. To support our bomber force, it funds $2.3 billion across the FYDP for procurement and $16.2 billion across the FYDP in research, development, and technology, with most of that $16.2 billion going into the B-21 program in its early years. We'll continue to invest in and recapitalize these important aircraft. However, we need your support in the form of stable and predictable budgets if we're going to build the Air Force that ensures the joint force can continue to deter, deny, and decisively defeat any enemy that threatens the United States or our national interests. Any return to sequestration level funding will force us to chase short-term requirements at the expense of long-term strategic planning, modernization, and readiness. And our budget problems will only get worse between now and the end of this 5-year plan. As Deputy Secretary of Defense Work said this week, the Department will need about $18 billion a year between 2021 and 2035, 2021 and 2035, for nuclear modernization. And that comes at the same time as a huge bow wave of spending required to recapitalize our conventional ships and aircraft. We look forward to working with you in the years to come to find a solution to that shortfall. We thank you for your kind attention and continued support of our Air Force, and along with General Bunch, I look forward to your questions.
Well, General Holmes, thank you, and General Bunch, we appreciate your testimony as well. We had the Navy testify and present their 2017 budget to us just a short while ago, and we asked them a question we're going to ask you both now. Is this a budget whereby you looked at the threats around the globe and said, this is the budget we need to defend and protect the United States from those threats? Or is this a budget where you looked at the dollars you had been allocated and said, this is the best resources or the best utilization of the dollars we've been allocated? The Navy answered that it was the latter. If we pose that question to you, what would your response be today?
Thank you, Chairman Forbes. I'd say our budget was driven by strategy, but it's budget constrained. We had to make hard choices within the programs that our strategy would drive. We balanced capacity, capability, and readiness, but as I spoke, we traded capability to maintain the capacity required for today's threats and to try to move out to regain the readiness that we've given up in 25 years of combat. So it's based on strategy, but it's certainly influenced by the budget limits.
Outside experts, General Holmes, have said that the Air Force needs to buy 170 to 200 new bombers, whereas the Air Force says it's planning to purchase only 100 of the next generation B-21 stealth aircraft. What risk does the nation bear if Congress supports the current program of record? Is 100 long-range strike bombers a COCOM requirement needed to fulfill operational plans, or is it a budget-driven, affordable number?
Thank you, Chairman Forbes. You know, our current bomber fleet is just over 150 bombers of the 3 types, of which 96 of those are combat coded. Historically, as the Air Force has looked over the last decade or so at what our numbers should be for the bomber force, we usually end up with a number of between 150 and 200. And last week, General Rand spoke of needing somewhere between 170 and 200 bombers total in the fleet. The fleet size of 100 B-21s is appropriate and ensures sustained high-end conventional operations while also supporting the nuclear triad. And it's underpinned by extensive analysis and conversations with the COCOMs to make sure that the B-21 fleet will have sufficient numbers to provide the weapons and sensors at range, which are the hard part for us in anti-access and area denial environments. You have to have enough airplanes to be able to keep enough forward to be able to make a difference. And we think 100 is the right number there. But we also know that our future fleet will be composed of B-21s and some portion of our legacy fleet for quite a while to come. And we'll have time to readdress exactly what that right number is, whether it would be additional B-21s or whether it would be some other platform at the end of that buy. Thank you.
So based on your earlier response that this budget was budget constrained, your response would be that this 100 number is not based upon budget restraints, but rather it is driven by strategy and our COCOM requirements.
Yes, sir, I believe this number is, but to serve the country well into the future, we also need an appropriate fleet size that won't fiscally overcommit the Air Force within all the other requirements that we have to meet. So the 100 was our requirement, and again, we'll have to take a look at it in the years to come and see if that requirement changes.
Okay, for both you gentlemen, DoD released a report in June 2015 entitled Plan for Modernization or Replacement of Digital Avionic Equipment. The report shows that the Air Force, unlike the Navy and the Army, has not made the investments needed to ensure its aircraft meet the FAA January 1, 2020 ADS-B mandate. Why is this the case, and how does the Air Force intend to operate after January 1, 2020? If FAA does not provide a waiver to their mandate, what are the fiscal and operational implications for expedited compliance?
Thanks again, Mr. Chairman. So if you look at the Air Force budget since 2012, right after the passage of the BCA, if you compare our budget to the 2012 President's budget, we've lost about $70 billion in buying power. If you compare it to the enacted 2012 budget and the totals that were predicted at that point, we've lost about $40 billion in buying power. So when we had to find a place to absorb that $40 billion, we looked at this bill. The total bill for the department is estimated at about $5.6 billion to equip all DoD aircraft with the required equipment. The Air Force's portion of that bill is approximately $4.4 billion, so the lion's share of that bill. And right now we're about $1.2 billion difference in between what we need to accomplish the mandate and what we have committed in our budget. We prioritized the airplanes that will be in the densest airspace first, so we prioritized our efforts in our mobility aircraft, and we won't make 100% of that requirement by 20, but with your help, we were able to get to the C-130Hs, and we'll work through those airplanes at the front end of the package. Some of our airplanes, there may not be a cost-affordable solution to implement it, things like the F-22, and we'll have to accept some risk in being able to use the most crowded part of national or international airspace. But the DoD made clear when the FAA passed the rule that we'd need some kind of accommodation. And although the FAA didn't apply a specific DoD waiver, the rule does provide for procedures for an aircraft that doesn't meet the ADS-B out performance requirements to obtain an authorized deviation to operate in that airspace. So we'll be able to operate, we'll be able to go where the nation needs us to go, but we'll be accepting some risk in delays or in extra fuel in some of the densest airspace.
Does the Department of Defense need a waiver?
We've begun to work that process with the FAA. The first waiver we provided was for the F-22, and we expect that we'll need at least some kind of memorandum of agreement with the FAA prior to 2020.
Okay. And again, if you would explain for the subcommittee exactly what happens if you don't get that waiver, and for the planes that are not compliant, what would they have to do? What would that mean?
So if there's primary radar in that area, Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the FAA will have the ability to work to bring our airplanes through that area. As the FAA shifts to new technology to monitor, there may be some areas that don't have primary radar, and in those cases, controllers, based on their workload, will make adjustments to sequence us through. As we worked through our C-130 upgrade plan, we were fortunately able to accelerate increment 1 to where we'll get all of those C-130Hs upgraded. And as we work through the rest of our fleets, we'll prioritize the ones that are in the busiest traffic areas in the United States that would face the most limitation. But we currently have parts of our fleet that don't meet all of the FAA requirements to operate in portions of the airspace. For example, our fighter fleet, the F-15 that I last flew, you can't get above a certain altitude in FAA airspace. You can't file a flight plan above it, but controllers will work you above it. And so we accept some delay and we accept some higher fuel costs to be able to move airplanes. But we'll be able to move the airplanes where we need to go to serve the country, but with some delay and with some higher fuel costs if we have to drive around an area to get where we need to go.
My last question, the administration has proposed to reduce the overall inventory of C-130s by another 27 aircraft and has proposed to delay the planned recapitalization of the C-130 fleet. Previously, the Air Force indicated that they had moderate risk and tactical airlift capacity. In my estimation, the budget request will make our tactical airlift fleet smaller and older. Can you provide an assessment of the Air Force, of how the Air Force intends to support with tactical airlift if Congress adopts the budget proposals?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Chairman. So in 16, we made plans
Could you, General, hit your mic there? That's,
I apologize, thank you.
we all do that.
Well, thank you, sir, for your patience. In 16, we brought a plan forward that would reduce our C-130 fleet down to a combined size of 300. It takes place over time, about 8 airplanes a year as we work through this plan. The Mission Capabilities Assessment study that was conducted by the department says that we need 248 C-130s to meet the warfighting need. And then they estimated somewhere between 20 and 70 aircraft above that. So that would be somewhere between about 270 or 320. We believe the position of 300 is a good position in that risk. And they estimated those extra requirements would be required to do support for civil authorities or other things required outside of the war plans in a worst case scenario. We estimate that that 300 is a good balance in risk if you compare to the risk that we're taking in other fleets and across the other parts of the Air Force. And we think a fleet of 275 strategic airlifters built into 479 tankers and 300 tactical airlifters will ensure that we'll be able to meet the nation's mobility needs by making use of that entire fleet.
Good, thank you. Mr. Courtney is recognized for any questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, just at the outset, General Holmes, I just want to again publicly thank you for working with the committee last year as we had obviously a high degree of member interest in terms of this issue of avionics modernization, and your intervention and you know, just common sense really helped us get to a good resolution. So thank you for that. And just to maybe get a quick update on the record, again, you've been pretty positive about your confidence level that we're going to hit that 2020 requirement. I mean, is there a contracting process that's begun? Is this, you know, is there enough funds in the budget in terms of, you know, what you're projecting to accomplish that goal?
We don't see, at this time, sir, we don't see anything that would preclude us from making that date. Increment 1 is fully funded for the 172 aircraft, and we are tracking that. We see no roadblocks to making that date at this time.
That's good news. And with regards to increment 2, again, it looks like the budget that was submitted this year, you moved up the compliance to 2028, which last year, I mean, we were out in the 2030s or 2040s or something. So obviously that's positive movement. So what factors, you know, are informing the current installation profile for increment 2? Is that rate dictated by industrial-based concerns, or is it funding related?
So it's we've laid in to get all of them by the mandate, and so we think we've met the requirements, and now we're building the plan for which tails we're going to go first, and we're looking at that in a holistic look as to the age of the fleet and how we go forward.
Good.
And if I could, Ranking Member Courtney, I would add that as you look at how fast you're able to complete those increment 2 kits, one of the considerations is how many airplanes can you take out of use at a time. And so we think we built it at a rate that we can manage that risk by taking airplanes out of use to be able to do that lengthier increment 2 modification against our need to get it done as fast as we can. And so we think that schedule is about the right balance of risk between delaying the modernization and making sure that we have enough airplanes available out of that total fleet of 300 to meet the requirement.
Great. Thank you. I just have one other question, which is about, the C-130s, which is the issue of propulsion and propeller upgrades for the C-130s. You know, Congress obviously has shown a pretty clear and continued interest in C-130H engine and prop upgrades that have provided increased efficiency. What efforts is the Air Force making to program funding to ensure that the entire fleet receives those types of improvements?
So right now, sir, and thank you for the question, what the Air Force is doing is we've started an operational assessment, and we're doing that with operational utility evaluation of the 3 propulsion modernization efforts that we had started. We had done each of those incrementally or individually, but we hadn't done those synchronized together in one thing. So we have now doing an operational utility evaluation with the Air National Guard and the Air Force Reserve Test Center out at Tucson. That'll complete in July of 17, and we get through that. We look at the criteria and how it's scored out. Then we will make a determination of whether we continue to fill that across the fleet or how we would go forward.
The gentlelady from Missouri, Ms. Hartzler, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I would have to say, General, that the the citizens of Tennessee, no doubt, are very proud of both of you. So quite an accomplishment. Appreciate what you do. I wanted to follow up actually on what the ranking member was questioning about the propellers and the engines. Can you just, going forward, tell us about how fuel efficiency would be impacted by the investment in propeller and engine modernizations?
Ma'am, I do not have a number in front of me. I know that's one of the factors that will weigh out in the operational evaluation will be determine how much fuel savings there are so that we could do the cost capability analysis, but I do not have a number on that. I'll take that for the record.
Okay, great. But that is very important, and be interested to see what your evaluation comes up with in July. As far as the LRSB program, can you explain the $3.5 billion reduction across the FIDEP for the program?
Yes, ma'am. The way the program was set up, we had estimated our cost by using a program office estimate, and we had done that up until the point that we got an independent cost estimate by an outside agency from the Air Force cost, AFCA, and we also had one done by CAPE and OSD, and the result of that was the new independent cost estimate that we funded to. It was lower than the program office estimate, and the difference across the FIDEP was $3.5 billion, or over $3 billion, and then we redistributed those dollars out to address other Air Force priorities, ma'am. That's how the number came.
Well, it's refreshing to see that the price comes in lower than you originally expected. That sounds good. And is the C-130H AMP Increment 1 and 2 fully funded to ensure the long-term viability of tactical airlift?
Yes, ma'am.
Good. All right. And Air Force roll-up briefing states that the FY17 funding gap delays the incremental replacement of the C-130H fleet. So can you elaborate on the impact of this delay, and please explain the risk associated with this budget request?
Yes, ma'am, if you'll allow me, I'll answer that part. So we had 8 C-130s in last year's program that were beyond the multi-year buy. And this program that we brought forward this year eliminates those 8 C-130s. And so we would stop at the end of our program multi-year buy. We'll do the AMP Inc. 1 and Inc. 2 upgrade to the remaining C-130Hs, and we believe that'll give us a fleet of 300 aircraft that are safe, that are compliant, and that are modernized to support them through their life. In a different budget position, you know, we'd love to be able to recapitalize some of the older C-130Hs. At the budget level that we're at now, we can't fit it into the program, but we believe we'll provide 300, again, safe, compliant, and modernized airplanes.
And the last question, we appreciate the amount of money that is put in this budget for the defense management system of the B-2. Could you kind of explain the system and how important it is that we get this fully funded?
Yes, ma'am. It is very vital for the B-2 to continue to have the ability to operate in an anti-access area denial environment, and it modernizes it to protect that aircraft as the threat has advanced, which it is, because the world has watched as air power has dominated for many years now, and they have changed the threats to get us to further out, and they've advanced. And this is just another step in the game to improve the defensive management system so that we can continue operating in that anti-access area denial environment.
Well, we appreciate your support of that and of all the platforms that our men and women in the Air Force need. So thank you. I yield back.
In general, can I just make sure we've corrected or that you have an opportunity to correct if necessary? You said the program was fully funded. It's my understanding that the AMP-1 program is partially funded and the AMP-2 program is not funded through the FIDEP. Am I incorrect on that?
Sir, I believe that the AMP Inc. 1 is completely funded, at least in 17 and out. We may have to come back and talk about moving some $16, but I believe it's complete. Inc. 1 is completely funded. Inc. 2 is funded within this FIDEP, and in the 20-year plan that I'm responsible to build for the Air Force, we have the money laid out beyond the FIDEP to get us through that 2028 date, which is outside of this FIDEP.
Good. The gentlelady from Guam is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing. General Holmes and General Bunch, thank you very much for your service to our country. I guess either one of you might be able to answer this. I asked this question at a previous hearing, but I will repeat it again. First, I would like to voice my appreciation for the Air Force's diligent work in moving forward with the acquisition process of the long-range strike bomber. The capabilities that this platform will provide are extremely, extremely necessary to maintain the defense of our nation and our allies. So, General Bunch, I'll begin with you. There has been recent criticism from one of our senators against the Air Force's proposed use of cost plus during the early stages of the acquisition program for the long-range strike bomber. Now, can you please explain why the Air Force prefers a blended cost plus fixed price approach for this program, and what advantages, General, it provides in this instance over the traditional acquisition method?
Well, thank you, ma'am. That is a topic of interest, and I'm glad that I get the opportunity to try to address it. Let me start with, there is no one-size-fits-all when it comes to deciding what kind of a contract you want to use on an acquisition program. There are various factors that are weighed out. On this one, we carefully considered the full spectrum of contract options before a decision was made by the Milestone Decision Authority to go with a cost-plus for the engineering, manufacturing, and development. In reality, over 70% of the program as it's laid out today is actually on a fixed price type contract. It's only the part that is in the EMD phase is the only part right now that is in a cost plus environment, but the vast majority of it is in a fixed price. The key factors that went into the decision to go forward with a cost plus contract were the risk involved. And when there's technical risk and you've never built something before, there's a risk that's out there, and a cost plus environment is a more frequently used in that case. In this case, we had mature technologies to meet the requirement, and that was good, but now we have to integrate all of those mature technologies together, which carries risk, and we have to build a never before built, low observable, penetrating bomber and integrate those on it. Those are the main technical risk areas that we focused on. The other one that you focus on and that we consider is can the contractor who is doing this kind of work absorb a loss if one were to occur? The example many point to right now is the KC-46 program. The KC-46 program is gone beyond what the Air Force capped in the expenses, but Boeing continues to do that and continue that work because they have a commercial line that they can utilize and they can continue to get benefits from. And the other piece they can do is they can get foreign military sales. Commercialization of a long-range strike bomber and foreign military sales are not two things that we're looking at. So the ability of any contractor that took this contract to be able to absorb that and not sell it out, that wouldn't be feasible. And there are many examples that you can go back and look at where we have tried to do fixed price development programs on new and emerging technologies, and many of those cases have not been very successful. Mm-hmm. But that's the reason we went down that path. We realize that one of the big concerns that people have with this strategy is the need to control cost growth, and that's a focus area that we've had from the very beginning of the program. We've used mature technologies, so we're not worried about developing additional. You're not developing a system along with the platform. You're just developing the platform. So we've limited some of the risks there. We have an independent cost assessment that was done outside the program office, and we funded to that independent cost assessment in accordance with the law. And then the other one we have on this program are stable requirements. Stable requirements and requirements control and funding with a good cost estimate from the beginning, studies have shown are the two of the major ways to control cost growth. So we're stable on our requirements, and we feel like we're in a good position for starting the program. The other piece that we have implemented here is our requirements control officer for the program is our chief. He's made it crystal clear the requirements are the requirements, and no one else is going to change those, so we have a tight control on those as well. The final thing I would say we've done to control cost growth is that we've structured the incentive structure. We've structured the contract with an incentive structure that incentivizes the contractor in the way we want. If they do not control cost and they do not control schedule, they will in the end not get any fee. So we have structured it in a manner to control those cost growths, and we know this is going to be a topic of more discussion, ma'am.
Well, thank you very much, General. It answers my question, and I yield back.
The gentlelady from Indiana is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. General Bunch, I have a question. What is your assessment of whether Boeing will meet its contractual obligation to deliver 18 KC-46As by August of 2017?
So, ma'am, we're still cautiously optimistic. Boeing still assesses that they can meet it. They're committed to that date. They've put additional resources to make that date, and but we have no schedule margin. And if I'm asked why I'm cautiously optimistic, we're still early in a test program that we talked about. We have been successful with meeting our milestone C criteria for an F-16, for the F-18, which was discussed, and also with the KC-46 receiving gas as a refueler. So we have made progress, but we still have a lot of progress to go, ma'am.
I appreciate it. And then also, I represent Grissom Air Reserve in Indiana, where many of those KC-135s are still successfully flying thanks to an incredible work of the airmen and airwomen there. So I appreciate your remarks earlier on how old some of these craft are. I am concerned, though, about the program delays impacting the amount of time those aircraft will need to stay flying. Can you provide your outlook in the on the program more broadly?
On the KC-46 program,
On the
ma'am?
KC-135s in the KC-46 program.
For the KC-135s, ma'am, we do have investment money laid in. We're finishing up the Block 45 upgrade, which is to improve their maintainability and their reliability and to more modernize the cockpits. And we're counting on those being in the inventory for quite some time. We've also done the FAA mandated things, or we'll have that done by 20 so that we meet that requirement and they'll be able to continue to operate. So on the 135 front, we're continuing to take an older generation of aircraft, older than myself, and continue to keep it flying and viable through investment, smart engineering, and teamwork with all parties involved. On the KC-46, we are a little behind on when we were going to do some of the initial fielding. We've delayed about 6 months the first 2 bases that we were going to field the aircraft at. That has been delayed because the test program was delayed, and we have not been able to get the spec verification reviewed and accomplished, and it corresponds to that. The aircraft are still being built so they can try to make the RAA date, and they're on track to do that. But until we can get enough of the test data and verify their performance, we can't accept those aircraft and we can't put them out to the field. So the program is progressing. We have been delayed on the test program, and that's one we're watching very closely.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentlelady from Florida, Ms. Graham, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to see you both again. I had actually a different question, but something you just said just sparked. First of all, you're very young, very, very young. In terms of maintaining this aircraft, what is the maintenance? What is the process for maintenance that you follow? One of the things that concerned me, I represent Tyndall, and when I went to visit Tyndall one time, I had someone pull me aside and say the challenges that they faced, and I'm sorry if this question's already been asked if I walked in, the challenges they face with just getting a part in order to fly the F-22. What challenges, if any, do y'all face with the maintenance of the, the Air Force projection forces? Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So we face challenges on the older aircraft. There's no doubt about it. We're constantly fighting diminishing manufacturing sources and parts obsolescence. It is one that the program offices actually track so they can determine where they can get parts. There are certain ways that we will work together, and in many of our efforts we will identify where the trends are, and we will make investments in those from a supportability phase so that we can modernize those components as time goes forward. So it is a risk that we run on all the older fleets. What we also find is that we don't know what we don't know sometimes. Sometimes we will find things as we go into depot maintenance. Sometimes we will find things out on the flight line that we didn't predict simply because of the age of the fleet and how they've matured through the use and the extensive use that we have with the platforms.
When you need a part, where do you go to get that part?
The Air Force Sustainment Center, ma'am, runs our supply, and we also work with DLA, and they work through various sources to find those. Some parts for some of our fleet, we actually go to the boneyard in some cases, and we'll pull parts off of aircraft that have been retired for certain of the older aspects. But the Air Force Sustainment Center is part of Air Force Material Command. They run our supply chain, and they're the ones that have to find out the ways to go get the parts and track those down so that we can keep the fleet flying.
Great, thank you. Now I'm going to go to the question I was originally going to ask. The chairman has been so wonderful to provide us an opportunity to learn about what is the emphasis behind the budget requests that are in the new budget. And I know there's different pressures that are on the military, preaching to the choir, right? It's a Southern saying. But in your opinion, which decisions stand out as something that's driven that you, from a budgetary restriction as opposed to what we need to be focusing on, which is making sure we're making decisions in the best interest of our strategic needs?
So thank you, ma'am. And as we work to balance capability, capacity, and readiness, which is how we think of the way we provide forces to the combatant commanders, in this budget at this level, we made choices to give up some future capability in order to minimize the risk now for the current fight that we're in. So the particular items in this budget I would highlight would be the reduction in F-35s from our planned buy, and we were 5 short from where we had planned to be last year at this time. We're not able to fund all what we call 4th generation mods, the modifications to our older fighter fleet that is required to keep them viable as they fly longer into their service life, and then also make them useful in the increased threat environment. So we want to upgrade radars, we want to upgrade the radar warning receivers, we want to add new computers to particularly the F-15 and the F-16, and we will get after those, but not at the rate that we would like to. The chairman mentioned we're reducing the C-130 recapitalization program. So the choices we made reduce our capability for the future in order to provide capacity and readiness for today's fight.
Thank you very much, and appreciate your answers, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Bunch, I just want to thank you for your commitment in the President's budget request for AMP-1 and AMP-2. I wanted to ask, is AMP-1, is it multiple contracts or a single contract covering all of AMP-1?
So it depends on which exact phase we're talking about, sir. So the answer, I hate to say, it depends.
Okay.
We are using small business for the integration piece of this, and then we're going to be competing the installations, and that'll be something that small businesses and a variety of other organizations will be able to compete for. So it's a mix.
Would the small business, that'd be a sole source kind of set aside?
I don't know if we did a set aside on that, sir. I'll take that for the record, get back to you exactly how we set that up, but I am told it's was informed it is a small business doing the integration.
Can you share with us when you plan to award AMP-1? You can get back.
Give me 1 second, sir. Okay. Let me see if I got it on the chart here. I do not, so okay. I'll take it for the record.
Okay, that's good. And then can you share if it will cover non-recurring engineering and installation, or both? Both or one or the other for AMP-1?
So we fully funded the AMP-1 program to do everything we need to do, put it in the field.
Okay.
And to meet the FAA mandate.
Okay, and for AMP-2, is the Air Force going to use non-developmental COTS, commercial off-the-shelf, for AMP-2?
AMP-2, we're still building the strategy, but we've done that in increment 1, sir, and we look for those type of activities to try to reduce our cost and to keep a viable supply chain and be able to do that in the most cost-effective and efficient manner that we can.
Okay. And I know this is not really the topic of this hearing, but it's since I had you here, thought I'd ask you a question that might be a little off topic. But I asked General Welsh about it yesterday, and I was hoping to maybe get some more clarity, and that was on the combat rescue helicopter. We've had reports that the combat rescue helicopter is not going to be fielded for guard units any earlier than 2027, which is 6 years after full rate production begins. And I was wondering if there was justification for not fielding the combat rescue helicopter concurrently in the guard and in the active component.
So in this case, Congressman, I'll say let me take that for the record for you and come back and see if we've made a base-by-base plan yet. I'm not aware that we've made a base-by-base plan yet. but I'll come back to you and let you know.
Okay, thank you, guys. I'll yield back.
The gentleman from Washington, Mr. Larson, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd have questions on the K-46, but other than you all, the folks, the good men and women on the line at Boeing, and me, we're all probably living and breathing it every day, and I know what I need to know on the 46, so I won't ask any more questions about that. I do have a question, just one, Mr. Chairman, on subject matter in your testimony on the B-52, and it's the length of time we're expecting it to, as a platform, to stick around, and combining that with all the discussion we have on A2AD environments. And so if you could talk a little bit, maybe more clearly or any more detail, specific detail about the B-52's role in the future for in an A2AD environment in terms of standoff and what we'd expect to be able to invest in it.
Thank you, Congressman. I'll start and see if Arnie has anything to add.
Yep.
You know, we think we can fly the B-52 through about 2050, and we think that we will probably need to. We need a mix in penetrating and standoff platforms in our bomber fleet, and the B-52, for all the talk we do about its age, is an amazing platform. It's held up and met the test of time. It's a testament to the airmen, both civilian and uniform, that keep it working in the depot. We're committing money to upgrade the radar in the B-52 to make sure it'll continue to be useful to us. We're adding a TAC data link so it can communicate forward with the other forces that are out there. We're going to do a crypto modernization program in this budget, and we funded upgrading the simulator to where crews can practice air refueling in that simulator instead of having to spend money to go out and fly to do that requirement and do it more often. So again, to come back, we think we'll need a mix of both standoff and penetrating platforms, and particularly for the long-range scenarios out in the vast reaches of the Pacific, the B-52 is going to continue to be valuable for us for quite a while.
Thanks, Tim.
And I will add one item. The other one we're doing a internal weapon bay upgrade to allow it to carry J-series weapons so that it can have more capability even than it does at this time. It has the ability to carry those externally, but we're incorporating that into the internal bay so that it'll have more capacity and capability than it even has today. And I'm a lover of the B-52. That's the first operational plane I flew many days ago. So I'm happy to see it moving forward.
So just a follow-up, can you talk any more specifically about, on those, with regards to those upgrades, about standoff weapons that become more of a
Well, any of the J-series weapons that the aircraft can carry, and we'll have to go through the certification to ensure that it'll clear the weapons bay and everything, but JDAMs are other weapons that we would not normally carry on the, we would normally carry externally, we'll be able to carry internally. It's really, so it's the ones it's already certified to carry, it just gives it more capacity to be able to carry them internal as well as external.
Yeah. All right. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, gentlemen, thank you. I just have a couple more questions. Then we're going to let you put anything you want on the record to clarify what you've said. Mr. Larson was talking about the KC-46A, and you've heard that you feel that that time period will be met to deliver 18 of those by August of 2017. What happens if they are not?
If Boeing is unable to make that contractual date, then we will go into discussions with them for consideration. And by consideration, I mean things that we, the Air Force, may want that we do not have in the contract today, that we would negotiate with them what we would get for any of the delays that occurred.
Okay. And when you negotiate with them, what's the leverage? Obviously, they will say they don't want to give anything. What is the leverage to determine how that's resolved?
Sir, we've used consideration already in a lot of different areas. It's the teamwork and the discussion about how we're going forward. So we've successfully done this before.
Good. Last question, and this is not directed to you two. This is something we're going to start for the committee as a whole based on some information we were giving at a retreat that the Armed Services Committee had last week. The written statements that you've both submitted to us, as I mentioned, is going to be put in the record. Did you have to submit those written statements to anyone for approval prior to coming here today?
We did.
Who do you have to submit them to?
We submit them to OMB for a review. They do a policy review, and then it goes to OMB.
Were any changes made between the original statements that you submitted and the statement that was ultimately submitted to the record?
I am not aware of any changes that were made. Mobile.
I'm not aware of any, Mr. Chairman, that
Were you given any instructions as to what you could not say to this committee?
No, sir.
And General Holmes, same for you. And again, this is not directed to you two. We're going to start doing it to everybody who testifies before our committee. The final thing that I would ask you is this. In your individual best professional military judgment, following up on something that Ms. Graham asked you, if you were submitting this budget and if your sole priority was doing what was in the best interest of the national security of this country, both today and over the next 5 years, and you were not constrained by the budget numbers you currently have, what changes would you make?
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for that question. As you know, almost 35 years in the Air Force, my experience is that I think there are two main things that an independent Air Force provides for a nation. The first is its portion of a safe, secure, reliable nuclear deterrent, and our Air Force provides what we call 3 of the 4 legs of the triad. You know, we provide the air leg, the ground leg, plus the command and control leg, and most of that. And I believe this budget makes the right investments for this fight up in that nuclear, but we're going to have problems again beginning in 21, primarily for the Navy, and in 22 for the Air Force on how we afford that along with our conventional forces. On the conventional side, the next thing that an independent Air Force does for a nation is it provides freedom of action in the air that makes all joint force operations possible by controlling the air and space. And I believe that that's the area that we've given up the most of our capability advantage over the last 20 years over potential adversaries, is in that air superiority mission that provides freedom of maneuver for the joint force. And I believe our nation's going to have to make a continued investment there to regain that capability, or we put all the capabilities of the joint force at risk.
And how would you have changed that in the budget to accomplish that goal?
So in this budget, Mr. Chairman, I'd say our options are pretty limited. We made a national decision to curtail the F-22 program. I think it's too late to reverse that decision. We're down to 120 combat-coded F-22s. And our F-15C fleet, we know in the last year we've learned that they're going to require major structural modification to continue to fly. And so we'll put some money into the longeron part of that. There's 2 parts to make the story short. Longerons that we can replace in depot, and then fuselage bulkheads that'll be cost prohibitive to do. So we have invested in this fight up things we need to do to keep the F-22's edge, but we need to move, I think, as fast as we can into a nation into some follow-on for the F-15 first and for the F-22 eventually. We're finishing up a study we call Air Superiority 2030 that we briefed out the first version to our Chief of Staff yesterday, and we think that'll provide a roadmap for us that we can come back and talk to you next year about where we should invest to make sure that we guarantee that edge that our nation depends on.
General Bunch, again, in your best professional military judgment, is there anything you would have changed in this budget if you were looking strictly at the national security interest of the country and you weren't constrained by the budget numbers you were given?
And Chairman Forbes, thank you for that question, sir. I agree with Mobile's assessment of the triad. We've made the right investments now. That's one that's coming from an acquisition perspective, that the costs beyond this fight up are one that we as a nation are going to have to decide what we're going to do. So that's one that we're going to need everybody's attention on, so we'll just lay that out there. But I believe we made the right investments during this fight up in those areas. The other one I'll go back to is one of the things that General Holmes talked about was the cost of some of the legacy fighters and some of the inventory. The quicker we get the F-35 in the field, the better off we're going to be in those areas, and that's one that would help us. I'm happy with the support we've gotten on the long-range strike bomber and that modernization roadmap. The big programs are all getting great support from all parties. But it's some of those, the F-35 and some of those decisions that will drive impacts to the legacy fleet that we need to watch out for.
Mr. Courtney and I appreciate you being here. We'd like to extend to you now an opportunity for any comments that either of you would like to put on the record, clarifications of anything you've said, things we left out, whatever you think might be important for this record. General Holmes, we'll recognize you first, and then General Bunch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, Ranking Member Courtney. We are appreciative of the chance to come and talk in front of you. We're appreciative of your leadership. Ranking Member Courtney, you talked about the Air Force working to get a solution to the C-130Hs. That would not have been possible without the leadership of you, Chairman Forbes, and you, Ranking Member Courtney. We look forward to continue to work with you. I don't have any corrections. For the record, we have some questions that we'll take to respond to you and to the members, and we thank you for the opportunity to be here.
General Bunch?
And Mr. Chairman and Congressman Courtney, thank you very much for allowing and for your support. We greatly appreciate it, and we appreciate the questions today. I'm glad we got the chance to talk about the B-21 and the way we're going forward, and the KC-46. Those are highlights for us as an Air Force as we move forward to modernize and recapitalize. And I have nothing that I need to correct for the record, and we do have some actions or questions that we will take back to answer, and we appreciate your continued support.
For that, we thank you both for being here, for your service again to the country. And with that, Mr. Courtney, we're adjourned.